I neutralized him with bread, not with poison like everyone feared, not with betrayal like his wife thought, but with something pure, something I'd spent my whole life perfecting. A simple loaf that got stuck in his throat while his world was falling apart. And I watched it all happen because I couldn't stop myself from watching him. But let me tell you how a woman destroys everything beautiful just by loving it too much. Before we go further, if you're feeling this story already, hit that subscribe button right now, smash the like button, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to be here for what comes next. Now let's continue. My name is Celeste Morgan, and 6 years ago, I gave up everything I loved. I left the museums of Paris, the bookstores that smelled like old paper and coffee, the narrow streets where artists painted until sunset. I left it all to come back to Riverside, a small town in upstate New York where nothing ever changed and nothing ever would. My mother died and left me her bakery. Morgan's Bakery, the sign said. Same letters she'd painted 30 years ago. The whole town came here. It was the heartbeat of Riverside, the place where people gathered at 6 a.m. for fresh bread and gossip. I loved baking. I hated that I loved it, because it meant I'd never leave again. My husband, Nathan, loved our life here. He grew up in Riverside, knew everyone, belonged here in a way I never would. He was handsome in a simple way, with dark hair always slightly messy and eyes that stopped noticing me somewhere around year 3 of our marriage. We were fine. We were boring. We were dying slowly, like a plant someone forgot to water. Then one Tuesday in April, I burned an entire batch of croissants. "What is wrong with you?" Nathan stood in the kitchen doorway, waving smoke away from his face. "You never burn anything. Never." "I'm worried about Diane next door," I said, which was true, but not the whole truth. "I think she might hurt herself." Diane Chen lived in the house beside ours. Her husband, Marcus, had died 3 months ago from a heart attack. Since then, she'd become a ghost, wandering her yard at odd hours, not answering when people knocked. "That's sad, Celeste, but it's not your problem." Nathan grabbed his briefcase. "We have a business to run. We can't afford to waste ingredients because you're distracted." After he left for his shift at the hardware store, I locked up the bakery early and walked next door. Diane's front door was open. Smoke poured from the backyard. I ran. She stood beside a metal drum, feeding papers and clothes into the flames. Her face was blank, empty, like someone had scooped out everything inside her and left just the shell. "Diane, stop!" She didn't even look at me. I grabbed a journal from her hands just as she was about to throw it in. The cover was leather, worn soft from years of touching. Marcus's handwriting covered the first page. "Give it back." Her voice was flat, dead. "No." We stood there, the fire crackling between us, holding opposite ends of a dead man's thoughts. Finally, Diane let go. She walked into her house and closed the door. I took the journal home and hid it in my workshop. I told myself I'd return it when Diane was thinking clearly. But really, I wanted to read it. I wanted to know what it felt like when someone loved you enough to fill a whole book with thoughts meant just for you. That night, I couldn't sleep. Nathan snored softly beside me while I stared at the ceiling and wondered when I'd become the kind of woman who settled for fine. The next morning, I saw the moving truck. It pulled up to the empty house across the street at 8 a.m. I was arranging bread in the window display when I heard the engine. A couple got out. The woman was petite, blonde, wearing yoga pants and a tank top even though it was moving day. She looked organized, confident, like someone who had everything figured out. Then the man stepped out of the car. Everything stopped. He had sandy brown hair that fell across his forehead in a way that made you want to brush it back. He wore faded jeans and a white t-shirt that showed off strong arms. But it was his face that hit me hardest. Sharp jawline, warm brown eyes, a smile that seemed sad even when he laughed. He looked exactly like I'd always imagined the male version of Emma Bovary would look, a man trapped in a life too small for him. I'd read Flaubert's novel 12 times. In Paris, I'd written a whole paper about it for a literature class I took just for fun. The story of a woman trapped in a boring life, dreaming of passion and romance, making terrible choices because she wanted to feel alive. This man looked like he'd walked right out of those pages, the lonely husband version, yearning for something more. "They're from California," Nathan said, appearing beside me. "The Suttons, Adrian and Melissa. He's a freelance photographer. She's a yoga instructor. Jennifer from the real estate office told me all about them." "Adrian," I repeated. Nathan gave me a strange look. "Why do you sound weird?" "I don't." But I did. Because somewhere in my chest, something that had been asleep for 6 years just woke up. The next day, they came to the bakery. Melissa walked in first, looking around with that health-conscious expression people get when they're calculating calories, like everything is either allowed or forbidden. "Good morning?" She had that bright California voice that made everything sound like good news. "We're your new neighbors. Just moved in across the street." "Welcome to Riverside." I wiped my hands on my apron, trying not to look past her to where Adrian stood examining the pastry case. "Oh, this bread smells amazing." He leaned close to the sourdough, closed his eyes, and breathed deep. "Reminds me of this little bakery in San Francisco I used to photograph." His voice was deep, warm, with a softness that made you want to lean in closer to hear him. I couldn't stop staring. "We'll take 2 of those," Melissa said, pointing at the whole wheat loaves. "And do you have anything gluten-free? Adrian's been trying to cut back on gluten." "I have, actually," I said, even though I knew Adrian looked disappointed. "Fresh this morning." "Perfect," Melissa beamed. "Adrian's always eating too much bread. I keep telling him he needs to watch his carbs." Adrian smiled, but it looked like it hurt. I'd seen that smile before. In the mirror every morning when Nathan asked if I was happy. I wrapped their orders slowly, taking my time, wanting them to stay just a few more minutes. "How are you settling in?" I asked. "Chaotic," Melissa laughed. "Half our stuff is still in boxes. The house needs so much work, but Adrian's good with his hands, aren't you, honey?" Adrian shrugged. "I try. He's being modest. He can fix anything." Melissa touched his arm possessively, but I saw the way Adrian's shoulders tensed, the way his smile didn't reach his eyes. That evening, I walked my dog past their house. Technically, it was Nathan's dog, a golden retriever named Honey that he'd gotten 2 years ago because the house felt too quiet. But he was always too busy to walk her, so the job fell to me. I didn't mind. It gave me an excuse to leave the house, to think, to breathe. As I passed the Sutton house, I saw Adrian through the window. He sat on the floor surrounded by unpacked camera equipment, holding a lens up to the light. Melissa were in sight. He looked lonely. I knew I should keep walking. I knew it was weird to just stand there watching him. But I couldn't move. Then he looked up and saw me. Our eyes met through the glass. For just a second, something passed between us. Recognition? Maybe. Or understanding. Like we both knew what it felt like to be the wrong person in the right life. I raised my hand in a wave. He smiled, a real smile this time, and waved back. Honey barked, pulling at the leash, breaking the moment. I walked on, my heart pounding like I'd just run a mile. 2 days later, Melissa knocked on our door at 10 p.m. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said when I answered. "But our power's gone out and Adrian can't figure out the breaker box. I don't suppose you know anything about electrical work?" "A little." I grabbed my toolbox. "Let me take a look." Nathan appeared behind me. "Oh, I'll come too. I've been meaning to meet our new neighbors properly." The Sutton house smelled like essential oils and cardboard. Moving boxes were stacked everywhere. Adrian sat on the couch with a flashlight, scrolling through his phone. "Celeste is here to save the day," Nathan announced, already making himself comfortable in a chair. "I'll just be a minute," I said, heading to the basement. But I could hear them talking above me. Nathan asking questions in his friendly, loud voice. Melissa answering enthusiastically. Adrian saying almost nothing. I fixed the breaker quickly. Someone had just flipped the wrong switch. But I took my time coming back upstairs. I wanted to watch Adrian when he didn't know I was looking. He'd put the phone down and was staring at his hands in his lap. Nathan and Melissa were deep in conversation about hiking trails in Riverside, completely ignoring him. He looked exactly like the male Emma Bovary must have looked during all those boring social gatherings. Trapped, invisible, dreaming of something more. "All fixed," I announced. The lights came on. Adrian looked up at me, and for just a second, I saw gratitude in his eyes. Not because I'd fixed the power, because I'd seen him. "You're a lifesaver," Melissa said. "Let me get you some wine. It's the least I can do." "Oh, we couldn't," Nathan started. "I insist." Melissa was already pulling out glasses. So we sat in their half-unpacked living room, drinking wine that was too expensive for a Tuesday night, and I tried not to stare at Adrian while Nathan talked about local politics, and Melissa nodded along like it was fascinating. Then Melissa screamed. A mouse ran right across her foot. She jumped onto the couch, clutching a pillow, her face pale. "Oh my God! Oh my God! We have mice!" She looked at Adrian. "I told you, I heard something in the walls." "I'll call an exterminator tomorrow," he said calmly. "No, forget that. I'm buying rat poison, first thing in the morning." "No!" I said it too loud, too forcefully. Everyone looked at me. "I mean, poison is dangerous. What if your neighbor's pets get into it? What if kids find it? There are better ways." Melissa stared at me, confused by my intensity. "She's right," Nathan said slowly. "Remember old Mr. Peterson? His cat died from eating poison someone left out for rats." Melissa's face softened. "I didn't think about that. Okay, no poison. We'll get traps instead." But I could see her shaking, see how scared she was. And Adrian just sat there, not comforting her, not doing anything. Something in me wanted to fix it, wanted to be the one who made things better. We left soon after. Nathan chatted the whole walk home about how nice the Suttons were, how good it was to have young people on the street again. I said nothing, because in my head, I was already writing Adrian's story, imagining who he really was beneath the quiet smiles and the sad eyes. And I was imagining myself as the woman who would finally understand him. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about Adrian. I watched for him from the bakery window. I listened for his voice when I was working in the yard. I found excuses to be outside when I knew he'd be coming or going. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong. But it also felt like waking up after years of sleepwalking. 3 days after the mouse incident, Adrian came into the bakery alone. It was mid-morning, the quiet time between breakfast rush and lunch prep. "Hi, Celeste," he smiled, and I noticed he'd learned my name. "I was hoping you could teach me something." My heart stopped. "Teach you what?" "How to make bread, real bread, like this." He held up one of my sourdough loaves. "Melissa's birthday is next month, and I want to surprise her with a homemade loaf. She talks about this bakery in LA all the time that makes the best gluten-free bread she's ever tasted. I want to try to match it." He wanted to make bread for his wife, for Melissa. But he was asking me to teach him. "Of course," I heard myself say. "Come to the back. I'll show you." The kitchen was warm, flour-dusted, smelling like yeast and butter. I'd spent thousands of hours in this space, but having Adrian here made it feel different. Sacred somehow. "First, you need to understand that bread is alive," I said, pulling out ingredients. "The yeast, the starter, it's all living organisms. You have to treat it gently, respect it." Adrian nodded, watching my hands as I measured flour. "Now you try." He stepped up to the counter and suddenly he was so close I could smell his cologne. Something woody and clean, nothing like Nathan's drugstore aftershave. Like this? He scooped flour into a bowl, concentrating hard, his tongue slightly between his teeth. I couldn't breathe. Perfect, I whispered. For the next hour, I taught him how to knead dough, how to feel when it was ready, how to trust his hands more than any recipe. He was a good student, asking questions, laughing when flour got in his hair. And I fell completely, hopelessly in love with him. Not the real him. I didn't know the real him. I fell in love with who I imagined he was. The sad, trapped man dreaming of escape. The artistic soul stuck in a practical life. The male Emma Bovary of Riverside, New York. Thank you so much. Adrian hugged me when we finished, quick and innocent. This was wonderful. After he left, I stood in the kitchen for 10 minutes, not moving, just breathing in the space where he'd been. Nathan came in and found me like that. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just tired." He kissed my forehead absently and went back to the front counter. I wondered if he'd notice if I disappeared completely. If I just faded away like morning fog, would he miss me or just be annoyed that no one was making the bread? The next week, Adrian and Melissa got invited to dinner at the Westlake's house. I only knew because Nathan got invited too, and he insisted we go. Richard and Patricia Westlake were the richest people in Riverside. They lived in a huge house on the hill, the kind with a circular driveway and columns by the front door. Richard owned 3 car dealerships. Patricia ran a boutique fitness studio and never let anyone forget it. "They want to offer the Suttons some work," Nathan explained as we drove up. "Adrian does photography, and Richard needs someone to shoot promotional material for the dealerships. And Patricia wants Melissa to teach classes at her studio." The dinner was exactly what I expected. Expensive food that wasn't very good. Wine that cost more than it should. Conversation about property values and local politics. Adrian sat across from me, smiling politely while Richard talked at him about brand vision and social media engagement. "You simply must see my home gym," Patricia said to Melissa, standing up before anyone had finished eating. "Come on, I'll show you where you'd be teaching." Melissa followed her out of the dining room. Adrian stayed behind, stuck listening to Richard's monologue about luxury car sales. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead, I followed the women's voices. They were in a large room filled with exercise equipment. Patricia stood demonstrating a complicated stretch while Melissa watched. "Your classes would be right here," Patricia said. "I'm thinking hot yoga, maybe some HIIT fusion, something that really pushes people." "That sounds great," Melissa said carefully. "And between you and me," Patricia lowered her voice conspiratorially, "it might be good for Adrian too. He could stand to tone up a bit, don't you think? Men let themselves go so easily once they're comfortable." Melissa laughed uncomfortably. "Adrian's fine." "Oh, honey, I'm sure he is. But trust me, a little motivation never hurt anyone. My Richard was getting soft too until I put him on a strict regimen. Now look at him." I backed away before they saw me, my hands clenched into fists. Adrian wasn't out of shape. He was perfect. But I'd seen the way he'd looked at himself in the bakery window sometimes, standing up straighter, pulling in his stomach slightly. Patricia had just planted poison in his mind. 2 days later, I was walking Honey in Riverside Park when I saw Adrian sitting on a bench. He wore running clothes and looked exhausted, his face red and sweaty. A water bottle sat beside him, half empty. "Adrian, you okay?" He looked up, startled. "Oh, hi, Celeste. Yeah, I'm fine, just took up running." "Since when?" "Since yesterday." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. Patricia offered Melissa that teaching position, but she suggested I should commit to fitness too. Melissa thinks it's a great idea, says we can train together. That's ridiculous. That's a guaranteed income. Adrian shrugged. Plus, maybe she's right. maybe I could stand to lose a few pounds. You look handsome exactly as you are. The words came out before I could stop them. Adrian stared at me, his mouth slightly open. I scrambled to fix it. I just mean you don't need to change for anyone, that's all. Thank you. His voice was soft, surprised. Melissa never says things like that anymore. Before I could respond, he jumped up with a yelp. Ow! Something stung me. Where? My back, under my shirt. He was trying to reach behind him. It's still there. I can feel it. Without thinking, I grabbed his shoulders and turned him around. Hold still. My hands shook as I lifted the back of his shirt just enough to see. A wasp crawled near his shoulder blade, its stinger embedded in his skin. Don't move. I brushed the wasp away carefully, then looked at the sting. It was already swelling. The stinger's still in there. I need to get it out or it'll keep pumping venom. How? Adrian asked, his voice tight with pain. I need to suck it out. Please, just do it. It really hurts. I pulled his shirt up higher, my face inches from his bare skin. His back was smooth, warm, perfect except for the angry red mark. I pressed my mouth to it and sucked, trying to focus on helping him and not on the fact that I was tasting his skin. Is someone hurt? A female voice called out. I jerked back, Adrian's shirt falling back into place. A woman jogged toward us. She was young, maybe 25, with long dark hair pulled into a high ponytail and the kind of confident beauty that came from knowing everyone wanted her. I heard someone yelling, she said, looking between us with amused curiosity. Wasp sting, I explained, my face burning. Got the stinger out. Oh, ouch. She looked at Adrian with obvious interest. I'm Julia Reeves. I live in that estate over the hill. Haven't seen you around before. Adrian Sutton. We just moved here. Well, welcome to Riverside. Julia's smile widened. It's usually pretty boring, but maybe that's changing. Adrian smiled back, and something about it made my stomach turn. Then his eyes rolled back and his knees buckled. Adrian. I caught him before he hit the ground. He's having a reaction. Julia pulled out her phone. I'm calling an ambulance. The next 20 minutes were a blur. Paramedics, questions, loading Adrian into the ambulance. I rode with him while Julia followed in her car. At the hospital, they gave him something for the allergic reaction and kept him for observation. Melissa showed up an hour later, panicked and guilty because she'd been teaching a yoga class and hadn't answered her phone. I'm so sorry, she kept saying, holding Adrian's hand. I should have been there. It's fine, Adrian said, but he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. Celeste saved me. I can't thank you enough. Melissa hugged me. Really, thank you. I nodded, feeling like a fraud, because part of me had enjoyed it, had enjoyed being the one Adrian needed, the hero of his story. Julia stuck around too, charming the nurses, making Adrian laugh with stories about growing up in the estate. I hated her immediately. The next week I saw Julia at the farmer's market. She was talking to Adrian by the vegetable stand, leaning close, making him smile. I stood by the bakery booth, pretending to arrange bread while watching them. He's handsome, Nathan said, appearing beside me. Who? Don't play dumb. Adrian Sutton. You've been watching him for 10 minutes. My face burned. I'm just being friendly. They're our neighbors. Right. Nathan's voice was cold. Just neighbors. He walked away, leaving me standing there with the truth hanging in the air between us. That night, I tried to make it right. I cooked Nathan his favorite dinner, asked about his day at the hardware store, laughed at his jokes. He answered in one-word sentences and went to bed early. I sat up alone, thinking about Adrian's smile and hating myself for thinking about it. The next day, Adrian came into the bakery to buy bread. How are you feeling? I asked. Much better. The swelling's all gone. He touched his shoulder absently. Thank you again for helping me. Anytime. He picked out a loaf and a croissant, paid, and left. 5 minutes later, I realized he'd forgotten the croissant on the counter. I grabbed it and walked across the street to his house, my heart pounding. Through the window, I could see into the living room. Adrian stood there, his head thrown back, his eyes closed. Julia's hands were in his hair, her mouth on his neck. They kissed like the world was ending, like they were drowning and each other were air. I stood there, frozen, watching the scene I'd imagined 100 times, except I wasn't in it. Julia pulled Adrian's shirt over his head. I turned and walked away, the croissant still in my hand. And this is the end of part 1. Want to know what happens next? Drop a like and make sure you're subscribed because part 2 is going to blow your mind. Comment below where you're watching from and tell me, what would you do if you were Celeste? Would you walk away or fight for Adrian?